So this is the part of the video where I go into a breakdown of what I identify as the four main party relationships explored in Gates to Infinity. Of course, there's more than this, and there's a decent amount of crossover between these pairs that I identify, but this video is already long enough. Anyway, those four main relationships are the player and the partner, Emolga and Dunsparce, Virizion and Keldeo, and Umbreon and Espeon. And we're going to start out with the player and partner. As discussed earlier, the player is pretty close to a true self-insert, and the game takes many steps to sell you on this immersion. And while as a self-insert, you, the player, are mostly observing everything around you, and the game makes a strong effort to make you feel a certain kinship with your partner in its opening hours. You start the game by falling from the sky and waking up to your partner. They come off cheery and adventurous, yet grounded, and they're open-minded enough to accept you being a human without much of a second thought. They offer you a home when they didn't even have one yet, and they stick to it. As mentioned earlier, they take the moral high ground in the girder segment when I suspect many players wouldn't have. I know I was not about to do that. And the partner is in the right for that decision. They make the altruistic choice of going after Emolga's job request, despite the poor reward. And then, by this point, even Quagsire breaks down in tears out of disbelief that the partner, along with the player, seem to be genuinely good people, a rarity in these times. All of this occurs before the introduction of any other party members, and by this point, the partner is basically infallible. And it's pretty hard not to like them, right? They're not just a bland Mary Sue type character. Narrative-wise, they've guided you through the first 2 hours of the game pretty successfully, and have helped you settle into this world with their leadership. And they don't treat it as a big deal, just something that people should do. And usually this archetype comes off as boring, but it's quite the contrast from most of the rest of the gloomy, negative world of Gates to Infinity in general. And there's also the fact that the partner is not without their faults. That, like, you get the impression immediately that, you know, maybe they're a little bit of a little, like, socially underdeveloped, for example, right? So it's your partner's not Superman, right? Which, again, going back to that Mary Sue thing, that's something that can make a character like this unlikable just because they're boring. The partner is not boring, right? And plus, they avoid the trap that I think many PMD characters fall into, in which quirky writing, like I described, that's supposed to come off as endearing ends up being annoying. For me, what immediately comes to mind was the partner in both Explorers of Time, Darkness, Sky and Super Mystery Dungeon. They both fall under that category for me. And there's a decent amount of other characters across the series that fit this criteria as well. But the Gates to Infinity partner is definitely not annoying. Was not annoying to me. Like, I would have a beer with them, you know? They seem like they would be genuinely pleasant to be around. And this is a character that I, the player, definitely have a close attachment to. And, of course, based on everything that was said up to this point, it is very, very, very important for the story to hit, as it is in every PMD, to have that connection with the partner in particular. So let's fast forward a bit. Herdier just got done talking about how the town hasn't been the same since the Rainbows of Hope left. The player and the partner leave Swanna's Inn, and the in-game player says, quote, "I wonder what," partner name here, really thinks about all this talk of doom and gloom. Herdier and Rufflet just said that all the Pokemon in this world have been feeling it, didn't they? Then maybe the partner actually feels that way too. The partner's so positive. Maybe I'm just overthinking things. I've got to stay positive too. End quote. It's quite the interesting point. As far as we can tell, the partner is the only character that has been tangibly impacted by the bitter cold, because the player isn't, right? Because the player's a human, thus they are effectively immune to the bitter cold, but the partner is affected by the bitter cold. We know this for sure, yet they still remain totally positive. And the game doesn't take long to explain this, as, in my opinion, the single biggest plot twist in Gates to Infinity comes shortly after. You and your partner head to bed after saving Swadloon. Your partner brings up that Leavanny and Swadloon got them thinking about the idea of friends and family conceptually. They ask if the player has anyone that they were close with, and then the partner drops that they never had anyone like that in their life. They grew up with no parents, no siblings, and no friends. They then follow up with, quote, I wanted them, talking about friends, but I couldn't make any. The relationships between Pokemon just aren't very good in this world. If we could get along just a little better, but everyone's so quick to pick fights. Even Pokemon who seem like friends on the surface really aren't. No one says what they mean. It's all just lies and lip service. I just can't live like that. That's why I've never had any friends up until now. I was probably no different from Virizion now that I think about it. But, you know, at least I never stopped looking. Not just for some superficial alliance, but for someone I could trust with the real me, a true friend. I thought about how great it'd be to actually do something real with that kind of friend, like making this kind of paradise, and that's why every day here is really so much fun for me. Thank you, player. I hope these days will continue, end quote. So there's a lot to unpack here. First, the suspicion from earlier is confirmed, and the partner actually was masking a fair amount of their true feelings on the world with their outward personality. As for that Virizion comparison that the partner suggests, that definitely does line up, and I'll talk more about that in her section of the video later. Second, the partner never had anyone close in their life and desperately wanted that. You can see how this ties in with adopting a very agreeable persona when encountering others, even if it conflicted with their true feelings. Anyone who has done this for an extended period of time knows the mental damage this does to you. And it has been hidden and stewing inside the whole time. Like, imagine you are working a service job, right? And you are putting on your work customer service face for who knows how long. Like, every interaction that you have with someone for presumably years on end with no break. People that behave this way tend to also keep more to themselves because of an innate lack of confidence in making friends, which again is the reason for adopting this persona in the first place. And yet the partner self-sabotaged in this way, putting on this persona, because the desire for finding someone to be close with was just that much stronger. And it stems from them, ironically, also lacking faith in the ability to make friends without being fake. I hate to use that word, but I think that's the best descriptor of what I'm trying to say. And the player showing up then was really just an extreme stroke of luck for the partner, because it's someone with no preconceptions of the world that hasn't yet adopted post-town social norms that the partner has just said in that quote that they highly dislike many of those social norms. So the partner thinks, finally, this might be a decent person. And so the partner managed to finally open up to someone, you. You gave them the confidence to start actually believing in their persona and start to actually live it out a little bit because they finally accomplished their goal of finding someone, I guess. But the partner's arc does not end here because there's a third point. The partner now has some faith in humanity in general, but definitely not everybody. Instead, they are sticking to their goal of creating paradise to escape the evil of the world and remain secluded. An extended period of isolation is not healthy for anyone. And it's a little scary to realize that after leaving Post Town, a fair amount of time before the game begins, the partner was doing exactly that and was about to continue doing that, right? Because they planned to purchase the land in paradise from Quagsire before they even met you. Aside from, again, the internal struggles manifesting inside the partner because of this, being alone for so long also means that your social skills start deteriorating, which can make it harder to undo the cycle. How do you make friends without social skills? But friends are the only way to get social skills, and etc. And the partner can feel outwardly confident while you're there. But what about when you're not? We don't actually know, because the partner never tries to leave your side, ever. Though the partner does try to extend this social circle beyond just you by inviting others to paradise and joining the party, you are ultimately what makes them feel alive. And this is reinforced later in the game, when after the first trip to the Great Glacier, the game throws up this great moment of dramatic irony as the partner gets sad when thinking about why you were brought to the Pokemon world and considers the possibility of you leaving once your goal is accomplished. And if the player has played any other PMD game, then they realize that this is 99% probably what's going to happen, which just makes it hurt a lot because, yeah, that is indeed exactly what's going to happen. Sorry. Sorry, partner. But the partner then rushes to encourage you to stay in the Pokemon world forever and makes you promise this. And you do, kind of without thinking about it, and then once you do, they feel relieved. And the player in-game points out how that conversation went so quickly and they didn't really have time to think about their promise. Because they don't know if that's true. They don't know if they can make that promise. Which, again, is much like the player outside the game. So you have that synergy and all that good stuff, whatever, bringing back that old point. So the partner feels like they need the player, and they associate their newfound genuine happiness with being around the player. The player always needs to be around. Now enter Muna. You might have noticed that I actually haven't talked about Muna at all in this video up until this point. And that's because I just see Muna as a mirror image to the partner, really. They both felt incredibly lonely and abandoned by the world, found someone that accepted them, the player for the partner, and Kiram for Muna, and then stuck to them as much as possible. Their differences really come from the differences between the player and Kiram. Kiram was pretty miserable and had so little faith in the world that he wanted to destroy the whole thing, including himself, by the way, and start over again. Going back to the Kiram theory, right? So naturally, Muna, having been so attached, I guess, took to that philosophy, since beforehand she was pretty aimless, honestly. Meanwhile, the player just kind of goes with the flow, and the partner responds positively to that and uses it as an outlet to help themselves out. And this is why I find it so satisfying that it is the partner who finally gets through to Muna at the end of the game. The partner is legitimately baffled that Muna was in such a similar situation as them, yet elected to form a suicide cult with Toxicroak, Perugly, etc., instead of becoming protective of their companions they deem close, which is what the partner did. And of course they're baffled, because the partner was self-isolated for so long that basically any social behavior abnormal to their direct circle is going to come off as a shock. Doubly so when the situation is so relatable to them. The partner then challenges Muna's mindset and makes the claim that her goal of ending the world is actually in opposition to her goal of being with her friends, which is true. They propose the notion that it is possible for a friend group to come together in joy and create a better world for themselves rather than misery and wallowing in how bad the world around them is. And it's easy to see why the partner thinks this way when you look at the party. And I like this especially because literally when the partner says this line, the camera like zooms out and shows the whole party. Very, very cinematic, some may say. But Muna then gets convinced and saves the player and the partner. Then comes Kiram later, who is only convinced with force once he is defeated by the power of friendship, whatever, between the player and the partner, which is really just a fruit of that same philosophy that was used earlier. And the partner's story concludes with the prism that you receive while leaving the Pokemon world. They knew all along that the player would eventually have to leave, but instead of being sad or anxious at this possibility like before, they take it in stride and realize that they don't necessarily need the player to be there to still feel that confidence that the relationship with the player instilled in them. Every PMD has the separation ending, and I still think Rescue Teams was the best, but I really like how Gates adds another layer to the player's emotional response, besides just feeling nostalgic for the journey and sad for leaving the partner you've grown so close to, but also being proud of the partner for completing their arc and becoming a better person and a self-sustaining person at that. Of course, the epilogue kinda contradicts this point because it's just about the partner trying to bring the player back, which is annoying, but I like to think that the partner more so just had a hard time coping with loss rather than necessarily being reliant on the player.